Hello, I'm Gemma and this is Non-Fic Books, and today I have a review video for you, and this is Robert Webb's How Not to Be a Boy. This was published this year by Canongate and is 325 pages long. This, you probably recognise, is Robert Webb from Mitchell & Webb and Peep Show fame, and this is sort of a memoir and sort of a discussion on how not to be a boy and gender bias when growing up, and sort of the fact that it can be negative for young men as well as young women. I would not have picked this up. As you can probably see through my previous videos, I don't tend to read celebrity memoirs. I just don't care very much, and I don't really watch TV or films very often, so I don't even know who these people are a lot of the time. So it really doesn't appeal. But I saw Simon from SavidgeReads mention this so positively, and I found it when I needed to top up another book order to get the free delivery, because obviously I'd rather spend £5 on a book than £3 on delivery. Who wouldn't? And he really seemed to like it, and I really trust his opinions, so I thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. And I really enjoyed this. It was a little bit hard to get into at first because I haven't seen the Peep Show, I haven't really seen Mitchell & Webb stuff, so I'm not very familiar with his stuff. And so it took a while to sort of get his voice and to get the sort of chronological sort of stream of consciousness sort of narrative structure that there is. And once I got into it, I really enjoyed it because there's a few sections where he, as a 43-year-old, is talking to the 7-year-olds, the 15-year-old, and I think maybe the 21-year-old, or at least he's discussing the 21-year-old, something like that. I can't remember exactly which ages, but I liked that sort of conversation between older him and sort of younger him. And he had a bit of a rough start, really, with a very complicated relationship with his father, who was an alcoholic and who was violent, and eventually when he was young his mother divorced his father, and I think that was the first year of school was when his mother did that, and then eventually got together with a second guy. He then lost his mother at a young age. I think he was 17, 18 when he lost his mother, and so he had quite a difficult beginning. And coming from that sort of background, especially he's from Lincolnshire, so sort of northern working class father, very much traditional masculinity being the role model, and then him not being like that naturally. It was a really interesting look at how he struggled because of that sort of pressure to be a boy, to be a man and not cry and not show emotion, and to like football and to be this very sort of stereotypical bloke, and how he struggled with that when he was young. And also the theme sort of throughout is how people who often do go along that path are the ones who often struggle the most, as they're the ones who don't talk about their feelings, and that often ends up with, well, one of the reasons contributing towards the fact that suicide for men is such a massive killer. This sounds really miserable the way I've just described it, but obviously he is a comedian, he is very funny, he does not he takes the mick out of himself and his arrogance as a young man. He's very honest about the fact that he did not want to go into comedy and writing for the art, but he wanted to be famous. He wanted to leave his small village life behind, and it's really interesting. I think there are definitely points where a hint of arrogance comes through, but then what he's achieved deserves that he should be able to be arrogant a little bit, because he really did work his socks off and get into Cambridge, and then actually managed to come out with a 2-2, even though he did not massive work and spent most of his time doing footlight stuff. And he's really sort of turned around a bit of a rough beginning, and it's very funny. It's interesting. It's also, even though he's only a decade older than me, that the idea of when I was applying for universities, if you didn't get into Oxbridge, that was it. You weren't reapplying another time, you could only apply to one of them. So the idea that you can sort of reapply and get in with lower grades, he didn't end up, once he took his retakes, he ended up with all A's. But at first getting offers of not all A's, which is amazing, because certainly when I was at uni, if you were considering Oxbridge, it was straight A's, and if possible 4 A levels rather than 3. That was certainly the pressure that our school suggested. Not that I did go to Oxbridge, but that my school really wanted people to. So it's really interesting that only 10 years difference, and quite a few people that I've heard of have around this era got in to Oxford or Cambridge through routes that I don't think would have been open for people only 10 years later. And I think that is really interesting because a lot of people have ended up doing some fantastic things that maybe they don't get the opportunity to now, and I think that's probably quite sad because I assume it's even harder and more competitive these days. Going back, that was a bit of a tangent, but going back to this book, he comes across really nicely even if you don't know him at all, because I'm really quite unfamiliar with his stuff. I really enjoyed the look at gender and child rearing and how important having broader role models and expectations of kids is, because obviously I've just had a little in. It's really important to me that I try and bring up her and any other future children I may have with as many opportunities open to her rather than trying to limit them without even thinking because of gender bias. And I think this is great for anyone who is interested in this subject, any guys who don't fit that traditional model, anyone who has children or is looking to have children. I just think this is a really surprisingly good book. It's not as laugh out loud funny as I thought it might be with him being a comedian, but it is sort of got a strong sense of humour going through it the whole way, and I think deals with some upsetting topics at points, what with him losing his mother, him being a bit suicidal at that sort of point. It's interesting for him because his first love was a bloke, so growing up in a sort of small northern village, that was a rather big secret. And I think it's a really interesting sort of autobiography, sort of discussion on how not to be a boy. And I recommend this. Certainly, I don't think it's the best ever book to look at gender and children, but I think it's a really accessible way into that subject. And I hope that it'll get people who might never have thought about it thinking about such an important topic. If you've read this, please leave a comment down below. And even if you haven't read this, go and YouTube his comic relief flash dance, because that is discussed in this and I hadn't seen that before, and that was very funny. And it sort of is even more funny when you have read this. So leave me a comment down below. Are you interested in reading this? Have you read this? What did you think? Do you like him as an actor and comedic writer? Because I don't really know. So if you think I should watch any of his stuff, leave a recommendation down below. And I'll see you in a video soon. Bye!